This Wurtsmith Restoration Advisory Board meeting is made possible through funding by the Township of Oscoda, the Air Force Civil Engineering Center, and the Osable River chapter of the Michigan Steelhead and Salmon Fishermen's Association.
Okay. Just going down through that, which I hope everyone has a handout. Since the last RAB meeting, our contractors, Wood has installed 7 more monitoring wells while they were doing the supplemental site inspection work around the base, and just going down through it, they did some more groundwater sampling, and then the transducers. They've installed 18 of those, and the water sampling results, we sent out the letters. Of course, today there was no mail, so hopefully tomorrow you'll get them. And then also, since the last RAB meeting, we had awarded the contract for Landfill 3031, which is a shame we don't have a map up there showing, but that's on the upper end of the base, north end, up by where the old DRMO and close to the YMCA camp along F41. We have awarded it to a contractor by the acronym FPM. So they will be doing that project, the focused feasibility study. So we finally, moving forward on getting some more work done on that landfill.
Yeah, on DEQ, we had 4 bullet points.
Thank you to the RAB members and to the audience. The update on the foam issue, for those of you who weren't at the public meeting last night, is that the foam system that we had set up to remove foam from Van Etten Lake during high foam events is not working. I admit that freely, that it's not a good system. So if you get the IOSCO newspaper, you'll notice that we've had an ad in the last couple of weeks. We're looking for local residents who are hazmat trained that could take care of foam issues on Van Etten Lake for us. So we're going to try something a little different, using local people to do foam removal work on the lake. As I said, the system that I had originally devised didn't work, so we're going to try a different system. So over the upcoming months, we hope that we'll have enough people interested in the job that we'll be doing interviews and then work with them to get equipment, licenses, and anything else that's necessary to do the work of removing foam on the lake. Also, sampling results that we got back from sampling that we conducted in September and October. I believe I sent those off to the RAB, also to Van Etten Lake Association, and let me think who else, and a couple other contact points too. So my hope is that those results got out to you. If you were at the meeting last night, they were on maps that we provided for the public to see at the open house portion. The old dump this is the county dump, or excuse me, the township dump located on Kings Corner Road near Travis Sanitation, has been a point of contention for many of the people in the Oscoda area that feel that the Air Force disposed of many things there. As part of a request from many people to take a look at that, staff from RRD went out this week and conducted multiple borings around the dump site and took groundwater samples. Those results should be back by the first part of the year, so sometime in January, and we'll be happy to share those results with the RAB and also the Van Etten Lake Association. So we hope once we get those results that will help us decide if there are any further things that need to be done in doing investigations around the old township dump area. Thank you.
Yes, please. Okay, then we're just going to give an update on, we did sediment sampling at the mouth of the Osable River. Next year, the Corps of Engineers will be deepening the channel And because we saw that there was PFAS chemicals in that area, in groundwater, and plus what moves down through the river, we wanted to make sure that the sediments themselves hadn't been accumulating PFAS before they started digging out those sediments. So at 6 different locations, we took samples vertically down to, I think, 4 feet, the depth that they were going to excavate. Turned out that it was virtually all just clean sand, and there wasn't a lot of organic matter, and so we didn't see any PFAS at all in those samples. So that was good news, because they want to take that and do beach nourishment with that sand, and we didn't want to see PFAS stirred up and get into Lake Huron and cause problems or spread the PFAS contamination. But fortunately, it's not retaining any of that PFAS as it moves through those sands. So that was one bit of good news. Then the last thing that we had was I'm going to talk later about the recent sampling that the DEQ did, just filling in some data gaps. But for right now, I don't know, was it Matt or were you going to do it? Which of you guys were going to do the? Okay, Matt. Update on the violation notices.
Oh, you want to go through? You want me to just discuss the last one?
Yeah, just the last one.
So the last violation notice that we sent out, dated November 19th, I believe. We cited the Air Force for violations of Part 31 involving exceedances of PFAS, which PFAS levels into Clark Marsh, groundwater, into Clark Marsh. In follow-up to that, we are requesting the Air Force increase the capture zone of the plume at FTO2. We are also requesting that they increase their the flows being put through the system, and then lastly, what we want to see come from this is groundwater venting at the into Clark's Marsh to be at a level of 12 nanograms per liter or less, which is the water quality standard. We had I think the Air Force is, we're expecting a response to that letter on Friday at this point. So that's where we're at right now. And the HHS?
Okay. Since the last RAB meeting, and as most of you knows, we got the deer sampling data back, and we got like one deer in the Clark Marsh area with high level of PFOS in the massive tissue, and that caused do not eat advisory in the Oscoda area, just 5-mile radius from the Clark Marsh. And as a next step, we are having a discussion with DNR to understand how that situation happened, and also there's also a plan to sample more deers in the area. And regarding the fish sampling result, we are still waiting Atlantic salmon from Asabo River. The PCB and the dioxin data still need to be analyzed, and the yellow perch sampling from Vanatan Lake is still pending, and we're planning to do in the coming year, and also for the Cedar Lake. So that's the update I have regarding the deer and the fish sampling.
Township, Oscoda Township. Yeah, just a real quick update on phase one, the water main extension. So there was a delay we completed the water main extension, but there's been a delay in hooking residences up to the water main. Part contractor error, confusion, but also some weather delays here as well. And there's been some progress for those wanting to get reimbursed for those connection fees. So we have that set up. But we will be doing water main connections in the spring. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Charter,
No updates.
Forest Service.
Currently, the only update is that our MOU has expired with the Air Force, and we are currently working with them to update that and get that into effect. My understanding is it's with the Air Force lawyers, so we are waiting on that right now, and that's our update.
Good evening. I just wanted to let everyone know that Chuck Vachon is planning a retirement January, February 2019, and I assigned him to be on the RAB, and I will take this position moving forward.
Good.
Airport.
The Brownfield project to help us do the environmental study to protect the land where we have some future development is still ongoing. A lot of loopholes getting that work on, but that's progressing.
And on the community RAB members, any updates? Yes.
Okay. The Now group still is continuing to have monthly meetings, and we have an active social media site where sharing of information occurs, and multiple RAB community RAB members and agency RAB members follow that site and share information. The community is showing concern about diversion of funds to other DoD sites, despite this site being involved in this issue for more than 8 years. They're also concerned about the U.S. Air Force claiming responsibility of the contamination outside of the base boundary. And then the community members are also monitoring and discussing legislation that could have impact on standards set for PFAS levels in drinking water.
We'll move forward with our presentation.
Before we move forward, you brought up a good point when you talked about Chuck retiring, and we may have several people, that are on active, that are the primary and the alternates, and that some, throughout the year, because we've been running for 1 year now, and along with the re-election of the co-chair tonight, there's probably going to be some people, through attrition and everything, just like moving into other positions. With Forestry Service, there'll be another one there. But we've also had a couple of people, and we want to have some more applications put in. That way we always have a pool of people. I mean, we had one that came forward today to see us. It was a former MDQ employee that had worked here. And he had an interest because he lives here. So, that's just a quick example. But there's anyone that's interested, go ahead, put an application in, get with the PA group, because we want to maintain the numbers that we're at over time. Like I said, this is the largest group, and let's keep it, moving forward and keep it as positive as we can. So, thanks, and sorry to interject that.
Malcolm?
Yes.
I've got a couple points. Okay. Over the last 3 months, there's been a lot of activity with congressional hearings that quite a few of us, probably about 5 or 6 of us in the room, have went to Washington, and then Kalamazoo for an EPA Summit, and then also another hearing by Senator Peters in Grand Rapids. So a lot of your people are going to these meetings and making great connections. So I just want to make sure that people remember that, because they need to hear from you. You're the constituents. That's where the money's going to come from. I've attended a couple of leadership, one leadership retreat, and I met with the Pease Air Force Base co-chair, my counterpart, and we learned some things and we shared some thoughts about, he's just 2 years into it and was just reelected. We're a year into it. So a lot of similarities, some differences. One thing that I learned was that EPA and the Air Force on that base took the next step to do a study of the human and health risks to the environment and swimming holes, old ones off base, the deer, the turkey, shellfish, those kind of samplings. So I got a copy of that, shared it with the DEQ and with the Air Force. They're looking at it. There are similarities to us in Clark's Marsh. There are some differences, so that's something for the future discussion. There's a handout on the 2 pages, and there's a website if you want to look at the whole report. And the second thing is the CERCLA full list of Superfund sites, contamination sites here on the base. We don't have a map. I've talked about it a couple of meetings. Last meeting I said I would produce one. Well, I've been kind of busy, but I put together a joint set of 2 maps, one DEQ, one Air Force. It's behind me right now. It's not pretty, but it shows a lot of the information that both agencies are producing. And there's been a lot of question about, do those agencies share that information? The answer is yes, and sometimes a little no. Maybe it's a timing thing. Maybe it got forgotten, whatever. But that's improving, and I've seen positive move forward on that problem. So I invite you at the break to come up here. I'll answer any questions. Like I said, it's not pretty, but it has the kind of information so that our RAB members and you as a public will be able to see 17 contamination sites that they found in their records review. They're doing site inspections over the last 2 years at most of them, but not all of them. Then they move to the next phase. Then they start talking about remediation. And that's the key word up on the top of these maps on both sides. Remediation actions. And so, and there's a little handout on the top of it, so please come and get one at the break. But that's the kind of information that we need to have in front of us every meeting, because we don't want to start every meeting 3 steps back. You move forward, you take 3 back in the 3 months. We got to stop doing that. And that's part of the change that Matt is talking about with the hour before. So thank you, and please come and let me know what you think.
I have one other item that I wouldn't mind. Earlier you talked about primary members and alternate members and the need to continue on. And I see an empty seat over here, but I see, what is there, 4 alternates on the community side sitting out here in the audience. And I don't understand why one of them couldn't take that seat. I mean, do we have to write up some kind of procedure that
we talked about that. His alternate is not here.
But there are other alternates here.
I understand, and you're going to talk about how Tim set this up, because I tried it last spring because there was one,
and that's
it
where
didn't
we're
fly.
going to have some more people coming in. That's the reason I mentioned that we do need to keep more interested parties submitting applications.
But in this case, there are alternates in attendance that attended every one of these meetings. My alternate is sitting there, and she's perfectly capable of sitting in that seat. And I mean, that's just a point that I'd like to bring out. I don't understand the reasoning behind that.
Do you have a request?
I would have a request that my alternate take that seat.
Okay, entertain that with the facilitator.
It's fine if she comes on, but
if there's going to be a vote tonight and we're a seat short.
then
we
that's.
do need to put, sure.
Just to get this straight, you just want somebody, you want one of the alternates.
One of the community alternates, and it really.
The one that would,
I mean, honestly, I don't see an issue with it, but I'm a facilitator. If the co-chairs are okay with that, I mean, somebody
you
said
okay
it
with
was
that?
cool. Doesn't, I don't see
Hey.
the harm in that.
And in the future, I'd like to see a policy for that.
and that's
There-
something that we need to discuss.
Yes, in the
and
future,
sort of iron
policy.
out in the
Right.
201 training or 102. The RAB training that's needed that we will be
Thank you.
having in the January, February timeframe that PA is going to be putting on for us. So,
That'd be a good thing to.
yeah.
There is a policy, and it was discussed last spring, so I think it needs to be changed to be more open, but, so that's all I want
Sure.
to say, we discussed it.
So I guess for tonight, we'll go ahead, and that way there's someone in that seat. Who is the alternate?
My alternate is Irene Dunn. If you would, please.
Right over here.
There's another vacancy right here.
Community member?
Yep.
Another alternate want to take a seat at the.
Go.
Let's go ahead and have
You
someone.
you
fill
choose
it.
one, I choose one. How's
There
that?
you go.
That'll work.
Okay.
That'll work.
Thanks, Dan.
That'll be good. Well, thanks for pointing that out. So,
Okay, any other updates from the community RAB members? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the presentation portion of the RAB meeting. Just real quick, you guys, so we're gonna have our subject matter experts give these presentations. If you can hold your questions till the end of the presentation, that might be the best scenario. If not, if this is something you gotta have, we're okay. But if it's something that we can hold off till the end, till they get through with their presentation, you guys can go ahead and we'll start out with Mr. Morris.
okay. Let's go. Move to the next slide, please. Okay, and we've sort of foot stomped this. It's a good thing. We finally got the GAC system, the central treatment system, and that's the official name on it. It's up and running. We finally got a benzene plant tied into it on the 17th of October. And, you walk inside that building, and I appreciate everyone that came out on the 30th of August at the last RAB. Sort of looks vacant in there, just seeing the system right now with all the space that we have. But that was part of the process to go ahead and have a big enough building for expansion and future treatment capacity needs. So, and one of the things we have noticed when we tied in benzene to this is we're having to back flush fairly often, about every 3 days, because of the solids coming in from the benzene plant. So one of the things we are going to look at, because we're modding a contract with the Corps of Engineers, Omaha Corps, and we're looking at probably putting in a green sand filter system at the front of the plant to try to filter out the solids, so we will not have to back flush as often as we move forward. So, and you look at the Mission Street there, that's part of why we're going ahead and modding the contract that we have with the Omaha Corps of Engineers and utilizing the contractor that built that plant to go ahead, and we're going to look at with Mission Street sort of a couple of cost benefit options. Do we look at where the current pump and treat, the air strippers are at the building that's there, and try to repurpose that building and pull the air strippers out that are in there, which were the towers and then put in sort of a GAC, maybe possibly a GAC resin unit set inside that building? Or do we look at going ahead and running the piping down the easement to the central treatment system? And at the same time, we will go ahead and mod the contract to put in the green sand filter system as well. You know, so that's one of the things we're working through, and that's sort of where we want to have more time to talk at these RAB meetings with you guys about these treatment options and what will work best. So there'll be more briefing on that as we move forward. But right now we're going to be looking at a cost-benefit analysis, and you know, which makes the most sense. Putting it in the existing building, repurposing, and not having to put any more lines in right now, or versus running a horizontal line and getting easements, which was a lengthy process on the real estate end of doing that. So that's some of the things, and we'll be keeping you guys up to date throughout the whole process as we move forward. And also with the SSI, since we're talking aero, benzene, and emission, we will be looking through with the SSI the capture zones, which you know, we've pulled those maps up many times, and you see those fingers coming through the plumes. So we want to make sure that the capture zone is adequate. And we're talking about different ideas. Do we put in additional extraction wells, or maybe do we put in a pilot study and we do a horizontal well? And when we know exactly what portion of the plume, then we do a horizontal well across that section of the plume and pull that. So, you know, that's some of the things we want to start talking more and more with you guys about. That way, we try to keep everything moving on a positive keel. So, but more to follow on that. So hopefully right now we're getting the contract modded with the Corps of Engineers, because that's the most expeditious way to get this contract rolling again and get the mission tied in. So.
Next is the vapor intrusion presentation. That's I believe it's going to be a joint.
Hi, I'm Beth Plain. You may have met me last year. I am sharing my project management responsibilities with Bob Delaney. Messing up. So, I'm here to talk to you about the vapor intrusion assessment at Wurtsmith. That's one of the tasks I was first asked to head up. This is a collaborative effort between DHHS, MDEQ, and the Air Force. So what is VI? It's the migration of vapor-forming chemicals, or the movement of vapor-forming chemicals within the ground and then up into buildings. And some common vapor-forming chemicals are volatile organic compounds. That's TCE, PCE, benzene, and these are some compounds that have been historically detected at Wurtsmith. Also volatile organic compounds. Go ahead. Okay. Why do we care about vapor intrusion? Well, it's found in a broad range of settings, and also a broad range of building types. So it could be a slab-on-grade building, a building with a basement. So you have to have that vapor-forming chemical, and then if it goes up into a building, that's when we may have an issue with vapor intrusion. We also care about vapor accumulations because they could pose hazards, potential health effects, and aesthetic problems such as bad smells. The knowledge that we have about vapor intrusion has been increasing in recent years, and also the risks associated with those vapor forming chemicals. So that's why we're concerned about this now. Go ahead. Sorry, back one, I think. Yep. Our biggest concern previously was with drinking water, but now we know that some of the chemicals and the vapor forming chemicals in soil or groundwater can migrate through the air up into buildings, and that's again why we're concerned about vapor intrusion now. We have increased knowledge on risks, and this is becoming an urgent issue across the nation. So state and federal agencies are continuously learning about the vapor intrusion issue. Okay. Okay. So factors affecting vapor intrusion are the volatility of the vapor forming chemical, the toxicity of it, the phase, whether it's in the soil, groundwater, and then it may get into the vapor, the amount of chemical, and also the location. So if the depth of the chemical, if there's a potential clean lens of water on top of it, and also how close the chemical is to the buildings. And then some of the building factors that may affect vapor intrusion are the foundations, openings, pressure differentials, entry rates, and air exchanges or mixing. So there's several factors that can affect vapor intrusion. And Matt is going to talk about how we're assessing this at Wurtsmith.
Okay, we started, it's a phased process. And what we are starting with are 25 sites across Wurtsmith proper. And we're working very closely with MDEQ. We're meeting on a monthly basis there in a collaborative approach, trying to work through things. And what we're doing, we start with these first 25 areas. And we're going down presence or absence, and we're meeting again this next week to keep on working down through that. And from the evaluation, we'll look at, when we go out to the field, just how many of those will we do a soil gas survey around. And from that, then we'll move on into those that need further evaluation. And with that, with VI, typically it's a mitigation process, should you go into that. But you always want to start on the outside perimeter around a building, within 100 feet of the building, typically. And on the next slide, we'll get into more of that detail. But this are the 25 areas that we're looking at and going down through. I think at our last meeting, we had over 220 slides going through each one of these 25 areas. It was an all-day process, and we will carry that on this next week when we continue with that. And look at the next couple of slides, and it'll just sort of give some of the idea on those facilities, the names. Okay, so, and that just what each one of those, and hopefully you have your print out of those. But then you see what the actual IRP site ID name is, and then it sort of gives you the name of it. Okay, go on to the next slide. But as we go down through it, we're screening those 25 for the potential of VI, and like I mentioned earlier, within 100-foot radius of each one of those in proximity to a known plume. And if it's petroleum contaminated, then it's 30 feet. And so we will go down through that pathway analysis and then move on further investigation in the phase 2. And that's presence or absence, and that's what we will work through with the MDEQ. and move on to the next slide. And that is when we will get into the soil gas surveys. And right now you can see the time frame, and that's when we're working through the conceptual site models, the meetings. And once again, appreciate both MDEQ and MDHHS in those meetings and with our contractor, Wood. And this has been sort of in the process, sort of at a standstill for over a year. And now we're moving forward once again. But we hope to have the draft plan to MDEQ and MDHHS by mid-March, and hopefully get out into the field and start looking at those, out of those 25, potentially, we're anticipating 9 or so of those will need to have the soil gas surveys around those facilities. And we will start in May, and then we will sample them for 1 year on a quarterly basis. That way we catch all 4 seasons to see any seasonal fluctuations. Next slide.
Just real quick, Matt, one of the charts, everybody with the slides, there's a misprint on the actual slides that you received. It's labeled as 2018. They should make a note of that, so when you take them home, you're not going to go.
Exactly. Sorry about that. You know, just going down through it once again, just foot stomping, because this is one of the things we want to start following, not only with VI, but on all these other issues with the regulators, is sitting down in this collaborative approach. And one thing we're going to start doing, our monthly meetings, we're going to start having those in Lansing. We're going to take it to the regulatory officials and sit down at their offices and talk to them. That way, versus them having to come up here or other, we'll take the show to them. So that's one of the things. And, you know, hopefully it will be receptive, this collaborative approach. But, you know, just going down through that and what we will be looking at. And hopefully the soil gas survey will be what, you know, to get it resolved. And then we'll move on from that point forward. But we're starting with the phase 1 of that. And hopefully we'll have the plan for the VI study and get that to MDEQ and MDHHS as soon as possible. Next slide.
Matt, before you go on, our map has 25 sites identified. You say 9 to 25 sites are considered. Are you going to cover some information about which sites?
Yes, we will. We certainly will. And that's still what we're working through. Like I mentioned, this next week we have another meeting. So we're still working through that. We're in the preliminary part of that. So we absolutely will, and that will be an ongoing presentation at the next RAB meeting for sure. And hopefully when we have that, we should be getting ready to go to the field, and I will have each one of those, and we'll have another joint presentation.
So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about the work we've just completed as far as more investigation. I know you're tired of hearing about more investigation, but it's filling some gaps in our knowledge, and it also we're in a dispute with the Air Force. I mean, everybody knows that, and so in part of that is we need to get data to compel the Air Force on certain issues and make our points. So some of that's what we're doing. You want to go ahead and advance the slide? Okay, so this is this nice colored map is all the samples that we've taken in groundwater. So this is all the residential wells, all the wells that we put in, all the wells that the Air Force has put in. And this is a very large area. This is over 8 square miles of area where there is groundwater contamination. And some of these things right here I explained last night was this stuff was we believe lab contamination. There were some contaminants in the sample from the lab, because this is a very difficult method to do, and there were very few labs when we did this initial work that even did it. So this one had some problems, and the chemicals we saw in these people's wells supposedly don't show up anywhere else on the base. So we think it's just from the lab mess up, and the same with these background ones here. But then and that's less than 10 parts per trillion. So unfortunately, it shows up as a hit, but it really isn't. So then this is total PFAS. And from a technical point of view, it's easier to understand plumes if you look at the total number of contaminants. And so we're just going to go through and look at some of the areas. Here's the FTO2, and these white dots means it's over 10,000 parts per trillion. So that means it's really hot where it's white, which is a little unusual, but purple means it's really, really contaminated. And red's awful high as well. Okay, so next slide. So this is what's in the groundwater. Next slide. Okay, so I told you we have been doing our independent work, and part of the problem was that as time went on, everybody became very concerned that their drinking water was impacted anywhere close, and we'd get calls from farther and farther away from the base, and then there would be political calls. The politicians would get involved and tell us we need to go sample, and it would be might be 10 miles away or something. So my boss finally said, well, go out and bound these plumes. Go and find the end of them so we can tell people, no, you're beyond the plumes from the base. Well, we've done that, and what's occurred is we've mapped all these plumes. Like right here, we can tell that the plumes aren't getting on the south side of the Oscoda. There's a plume that starts around here, around the school. That's because a fire was put out there. But we're not seeing the contaminants make it their way across. And we see that in residential wells as well. The ones right around school have been impacted, and you get away a little ways from it, and they're clean. It is getting on the other side of the Oscoda down in this area, though. And so we went up here to Cedar Lake, and what we found is that these are not plumes coming from the base. This is not AFFF, that firefighting foam that's up there. That's another set of chemicals, PFAS chemicals. So we don't know what's going on that. We know that the lake's got contamination, and there's a creek that goes into it, it's got contamination. Down here at the Oscoda, we ran into another plume because we weren't seeing PFAS and perfluorohexane sulfonate, which are in the AFFF in the firefighting foam. And then all of a sudden we get down here right at the mouth of the Oscoda and we see that. And so we think, well, okay, there's another source or something going on in that area as well. So those are the kinds of things that we were looking at. And this is very typical. If you go to other cities where there's a PFAS problem and you start sampling in bigger and bigger area, what you do is you run into small plumes from multiple things, because every time somebody put out a fire, a tanker blows up or something, somebody's going to use some foam. So there's a lot of these kinds of things. The farther you get out, the more you run into these little problems, or smaller problems. They're not little problems, but they're smaller problems. Okay, next slide. All right, so I've shown you the groundwater. Now, as the groundwater moves towards surface water, if you walk around in a lake, you'll go across the cold spot where the spring's coming out. That's groundwater. Groundwater's colder often than lake water, and so when you step on it, you'll feel that. You'll feel the groundwater's coming out right there. Well, that's an illustration of what's called the groundwater surface water interface. Right in that area where the groundwater is just coming into the surface water. Sometimes it mixes with the surface water. Sometimes it's like that spring that's just blowing out really hard. And so what we want to do is we want to find where the plumes are coming out into the surface water to see what the levels are, what the impact is. Now at Van Etten Lake, we kind of know what's going on because we can see the surface water, you can see the seeps and stuff like that. So here we did this. What you do is you take a little pin, it's about this thick, shove it down into the ground, suck the water out from maybe six inches down or whatever, and that's the groundwater that's just coming into the surface water. So if you do that, and then you find contamination. Now, this is just what is this? This is just PFOS, the one particular chemical that has a criteria. So that's what this map is illustrating with the colors. So only this one right here was above the water quality standard, the 12 parts per trillion that you've heard about. And then the rest of these, they showed the plume coming out in multiple areas, but wasn't showing a lot of PFOS. We just weren't in the worst parts of the plume. We don't know where exactly it's coming out, and we're just kind of doing exploration. So we know we're in the plume, but we haven't found the hottest spots here going into Van Etten Lake. But so now this is the groundwater coming into Van Etten Lake. Next slide, please. And then so then what happens? Obviously, once you get it into the surface water. Then we start sampling the surface water, and as you can see, we found fairly high levels of total PFAS in this case in the surface water. So you're seeing that PFAS in the surface water. I don't know if we have, and anything that's yellow. Oh well, this is total PFAS. Anyway, that's the total plume as we can measure it as it gets into surface water, and it's highly diluted. So these are some fairly high levels in surface water because you just know it's quite diluted. Next slide. Oh, and then this was just to show you where the exceedances were in the surface water. So you're seeing in the surface water PFOS, that one particular chemical that gets in the fish. And the reason it's 12 parts per trillion is because it builds up in the fish, it magnifies. So that's in the fish. And these are the areas what we've found so far in the surface water that's above that. So it's pretty evident why you have it in your fish. Next slide. So again, that big groundwater map, I didn't show it again, but you'd see that there's lots of contamination of groundwater. And this was one of the more more important slides because we didn't know what was happening in the Oscoda River. When you look at the surface water, there is so much water flowing through that river that it gets pretty diluted out really fast. So we didn't know where the PFAS was coming into the river. So you can see from here, this is above the criteria, the 12 parts per trillion, and it extends through this whole area. This is Clark's Marsh, and if you get up close, you can see some really high numbers of the groundwater just as it gets into surface water. And then you can see 3 pipes drain, for those of you who are familiar with it. That's got 2 plumes, looks like, or maybe 1 big plume discharging with a couple points that are above the criteria. So this is just before it gets to surface water. Now let's see the surface water stuff. Okay, and so this is the surface water, and no shock in that this is total PFAS, and I'll show you the PFOS one in a second, but really hot in Clark's Marsh, and you all knew that anyway, but this is just showing it. This is actually the surface water, so you're seeing these white dots are over 2,500 parts per trillion of PFOS or PFAS in the surface water. You can go to the next slide. But you can see these other places. So, and then PFOS is here. And one of the interesting things is a lot of the plumes on this side have PFOS in it as the highest contaminant. But on the east side, we see a lot of the perfluorohexane sulfonate form of the AFFF, which was, I believe they moved to that later in their production. PFOS is 8 chain, and perfluorohexane sulfonate is 6-chain, and they found that the 6-chain, well, first of all, it's not regulated, and secondly, it's also a little bit more effective on fires, so that they just changed the formula a bit. But it is kind of interesting that more of the plumes over here, so you don't see as many red dots in the surface water because those plumes just didn't have as much PFOS in them as the plumes on this side did. I think that, oh, maybe we got one on foam in Cedar Lake. Next slide. That's it? Okay. All right, well, that's the surface water findings. Any question?
Bob, the lighting and views in here are just awful. Can we find these slides online or get something to view them? They aren't part of the...
Right. Well, I've sent them to the Air Force, so I don't know if they... But we can get them on the... Arnie, did you get them too? We just need them up on the web.
They were sent today.
Yeah, they were sent.
I got it today.
Both presentations are in the email, so they should be in your inbox if you haven't seen it yet.
So they're in the email, they were sent out today to the RAB members and their email.
Okay.
And also as part of the video, JD is incorporating on the video, it'll be off the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Okay, so that's another
Right.
immediate thing that you can look at.
And hopefully they'll get up on the MPART webpage too. That would help for everybody too. You had a question over here?
Yeah, the one red dot that you showed up on the southeast end of Cedar Lake, was that a well?
It was one of our drill holes. It wasn't a residential well. It was one of ours. I mean, there are residential wells that are impacted up there, but that one was one of our soil borings.
If you changed the scale on red, what was the value?
Oh boy. Let's see. What was the scale on that? I think it was over 70. Yeah, that one I think was 90 parts per trillion total. So it would have been in the red, would have been 70 to 1,000, I think. Yes.
When you were quoting not detectable results of your sediment sampling at the exhibit to the Carolina, were you quoting the PFAS as well as PFOS total?
Right. There was no PFAS chemicals in it. So, yeah. The miracles never cease, no. I was glad to see that.
In the lake waters, have you found a difference in the different levels?
Stratification.
Correct.
We haven't really done that study. So, well, when we get, as we find out where it's discharging, but that is an interesting question. And I don't know that anybody's looked at that at all. We do know those long chain ones that create the foam, they are less soluble, so they want to get out of the water, and that's why they're at that interface. The shorter chain ones, those are the ones that are more soluble, and so they will stay in the water. And so that's why you see the foams. It looks like why the foams are made out of those long chain ones and not the short chain ones, but that's the only stratification that I'm aware of at this time.
The one slide you showed with all the wells?
Yeah.
Did that include the monitoring wells?
Monitoring and residential. Residential are squares, and the monitoring ones are circles. Yeah, I don't know how we want to make that a day. I've given the RAB co-chair the data in the past, data dumps, and we can do that, whenever.
I'd be interested to see some of the results.
Actual numbers. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Jeff.
Two questions. One, as it relates to the surface water sampling at the river mouth and down towards the end of the river, it shows that it's less than 12 parts per trillion, which is a great sign. Are those the water samples that you took, Mike, on just the recent ones, or are these previous to the current sampling that we did?
I believe those are previous.
Previous, okay.
but we'll see the current ones coming out pretty soon, you think, the results of those? Perfect. And then, as far as the Detasabo, has there been any conversation about looking to see if the plumes inside the Detasabo, the bayous, the wetlands, where there has been conversation about what's going on inside of that protected area, or have we considered?
We got some residential well
evaluating that
data.
area?
We got residential well data. I don't know if any of your borings ended up in that. I mean, you guys can look on the map and see if it did, but.
We have the one boring, I can't think of the name of the street. There's one at the end of the street by a bayou area on
Right.
the end. And then there's a couple residential well samples down there.
Right.
And then, of course, the Paleo channel would have taken into some of that also.
Would that have been like by the KOA and back in that area at all, or? I think that's more east.
I'm trying to think of the name of the street, but there's an east-west street that comes off of US 23.
Johnson?
Johnson, we have some people on advisory on Johnson. So, I mean, there's been one or two, I think we've tested residential wells on
Yeah,
Johnson.
we also, if I'm not mistaken, put in a boring down there.
Yeah.
Mocky wells in that boring.
Yeah, I'm just curious if we're coming further south, down the bayou, down the old Detasabo, down by Maitiki. I don't think we evaluated anything down in the.
We did not go that far.
Yeah.
And there is a spot, a hot spot down by the state park launch.
Right.
And that we need to look at, does not appear to be associated with the plume from the base.
Right.
And that will take
Well,
time to go investigate.
Right.
And determine the source. And just like the question was asked, by Rex up at Cedar Lake, there are a couple hot spots up by there.
Right.
Do not appear to be associated with the base, and that'll just take investigative time by myself to figure out what might be sources available there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as he mentioned too, they're doing McDonald's store area, and they're doing the dump out north of Van Etten Lake. So, we're just moving. It just it's the gift that keeps on giving. So we need to get back down to your area, and we need to get around Cedar Lake as well. So.
Okay, well, thanks, Bob, for the presentation.
Yeah. Time.
And
Okay.
I think with the issues that we saw, it's all important to make sure to get your presentation to Brianne and Malcolm far in advance. That way you can get it out to everyone, about a week ahead of time. So that will help in the future too. So.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and, sorry for jumping back and forth, it wasn't planned, to my madness. I'm gonna go ahead and revisit the, co-chair. Brought that up. It doesn't appear we had any, people nominate themselves for the position. We're gonna go ahead and continue moving forward, Mr. Lonnie.
Well, you haven't even asked me if I want to run. Well, okay, I'm nominated. But there is something I would like to share. I started this journey 4 years ago in visiting with the townships, their meetings, the town hall meetings, and it was easy for me to hear the lingo and all that and understand most of it because of my background. But what was not easy was understanding what the different agencies were doing, including the townships, the DEQ and all that, and the Department of Health. That was the more difficult part. And we've had ups and downs. We're now kind of on another down, the way I look at it, because agencies are pulling away from regulations. The state is trying to do that, and the legislature, and I don't know if everyone realizes the impact of the unknown on decision makers. It is huge, and that hurts this area more than anywhere out in the state. is my impression. And I'm not a Michigander, been here 10 years. It's the people in the room right here that you've lived your life here, or you've been invested in here in summers and everything. You're the ones that need to be engaged on, in one word, remediation. Last night was a lot of health, which is good. Drinking water, that's what last night was all about. And it's a little bit here too, if the drinking water is affected at a higher level. Unfortunately, EPA, my old agency, has messed up, and they set it at 70, and they're not moving from it. I think that's unfortunate. That may change. However, the Air Force, that's their number. They're not going to voluntarily move off that dime. It's clear. Unless you get your legislators involved, you get ATSDR involved more, you get your State Department of Health, and you get them involved, and you convince your legislatures they've got to reduce it. Aaron's been working hard at that particular topic, and so there's hope there. But as far as the RAB, it's been an honor to serve for this year. Typically, all the RABs that I've looked at and the co-chairs I've talked to, it's a 2-year term, because just like anything, especially the first year, there's a lot of ramp up and getting going and understanding what the job is. And that's been hampered by a lot of things, dispute resolution, and things like that. But we made progress. The failure that I have and what we've been able to accomplish, and I blame myself a lot for this, is the inability to engage with the 15 or 14 others. I don't talk to myself too much. And impress upon them the need for them to understand a certain topic that they're passionate about. Pick that one. So a primary and alternate, work together as a team. Bob brought this up at one of our work sessions. That's important. Or another alternate. And you can even switch around, let's say for the year, and form a team of what's important to you, and you can represent a constituent that comes in the town and they want to learn more about, like someone just approached me tonight about the vapor intrusion. They live there and they see the plume map and everything, or they see the areas of concern you're looking at, and it's right over their home. They're right on the big lake. I couldn't answer that. So, but maybe one other RAB member may want to pick that up because you've lived here. You're in the plume area. That's what we need. You can't depend on me to have all the answers. I'm not saying you've been doing that. It's just I can't put any more time into it. I can't put any more money into it. It was an honor to go to the hearing at Senator Peters. I did not call and ask to be on that because there were 2 other people I thought that were better qualified to represent you. But he did ask me, and I asked the townships and the NOW and others, the airport authority, please give me your top 2 topics that you want the senators to hear. Okay? I'm sad to say I only got 2. The phone was 1, Tony. The airport gave me 1. Those 2 were in my verbal testimony. Senator Peters heard that. He asked about them. He developed questions around some of those. But we've got to be prepared at the time that there's someone higher up, a decision maker, to hear us, all of us. We need to be prepared with knowledge on these topics. So that was my biggest failure, is not being able to pull that out. I hope I've got the Air Force interested in this joint sharing data type representation of all the contamination sites. I really hope so. And anyone who looked at it, please give us suggestions. Don't understand it. And the last thing is, I will do it, and I will do the best of my ability, but it's got to be a team effort, because it'll fail. You won't get the product out of the RAB that you deserve, nor is it designed to do, because it is designed to share. Transparency and timeliness needs to be improved, but it is designed to do that. We just have to share the information at the appropriate time and ahead of time, so that we can be prepared at a meeting to use it. So that's all I want to say. So we'll see how the vote goes. But I am also going to push the Air Force, because they're looking at the RABs and consistency, about having an alternate, even unofficial, an alternate co-chair. I started it with Dan. Raise your hand, Dan. I brought him on a couple of one call, and also some projects reviewing what the RAB team, the Air Force team, heck, I'm on a call with 4 or 5 of them, and they've got all the consultants and everything, and there I am on the call, just me. So can't do that forever. It's not fair to you guys. It's not fair to you guys. So that's one thing I hope that we can institute, is having a backup on the co-chair. Okay. But thank you for this last year. It's been a learning lesson.
Thanks, Arnie. No, I think it should be a pretty easy vote.
Yeah. Then we're just gonna go ahead and move forward.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and open it up to the, open it up to the public comment portion. We have 4 people asking, please let me know. Right now we have 4, and when you get up there, you just walk up to the podium. If you're not part of the RAB, walk up to the podium and use the microphone there to ask a question. Or please, I also ask if you could limit those comments and those questions to 2 minutes. And you keep it to 1 question, to be clear for whomever it is that you're asking, so they can do the best response. So first writing we have was Mr. Marie. Did you sign in the right?
Oh, I signed up on the wrong one.
Oh,
sorry.
Signing into the.
No, I've said enough.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, we got Mr. Greg Cole.
Greg Cole, now group member, Oscoda resident, Van Etten Lake. Last RAB meeting I was up here, and I requested that Matt look into funding, the Air Force funding the videotaping. And I'm here to thank the Air Force and the township getting together and doing the funding for tonight's broadcast. And so I figured I'm 1 for 1, so I want to put in another request tonight. So in the past RAB meetings, Matt has expressed CERCLA and the importance of how CERCLA affects I guess you say, the operations of the Air Force and the relationship between the Air Force and CERCLA. And I got thinking, I've been involved with this PFAS for a few years now, and I'm in the NOW group, and I don't understand the CERCLA process. And it's not because I haven't tried. And I feel that if I don't understand CERCLA, there's probably many in the community here in Oscoda that doesn't understand it either. Oh, you got it? Oh.
Maybe that will help.
Yeah, well,
Sort of showing where we are right now in the CERCLA process, and the future steps to follow. And then also the interim actions thus far.
Great.
So, and let me hand these out. You can just pass them around. I'm sorry I don't have enough copy.
That's something that we could also email.
Yeah, do you have it where you can pull it up?
I don't believe we have it.
Okay. Yeah.
So I got a couple more comments. What I was requesting is that Matt and Arnie get together and implement a training program for the RAB board members to get a better understanding.
And that was what we talked about, the 201 training?
Oh.
That is being developed right now, and hopefully we'll have it in between snow and ice storms in late January, early February.
Yes, we are working with the other, in fact, if I could speak a little bit, I'm working with my counterpart at Pease, actually. She has a lot of experience around, and we're going to go ahead and
Because I feel that for the community to understand the rules and regulations that the Air Force has to go by, we have to understand CERCLA. And Arnie has helped me with it to try and understand it, Tony, Kathy. But I think that if our RAB members get training in it and they can bring it back to the community so we can clearly understand what the process is, then we can clearly understand what the Air Force what the procedures and regulations that the Air Force has to go by, which I feel will make the RAB meetings more effective. It will save time, and we won't stray off, what the RAB meeting, the restoration's about, and that we understand what CERCLA means. Thank you.
Malcolm, if I could just say, I was remiss in my opening to not thank the Air Force for coming up with the $455 per month for 4 meetings for a year, and also the township for another 300 plus. So that was really great. I can tell you that the tribal nation, Chippewa, is reviewing tomorrow. It's a second review of an application that I submitted a few weeks ago, a second version of it. So maybe we'll get some money there. One thing that happened though was there was a cut in the number of cameras from 4 to 2. And what that causes is not too much here for us, but for the people that look at the video later, they can't see the speaker and so forth. So I approached the Steelheaders group. They paid for the first one back in February. They paid the whole thing then, and they kicked in enough money to purchase one more camera crew. So I want to thank them also. But it's a team effort, and so we're going to have a good product going out right now.
I have a question about the handout.
Yes, sir.
So clearly this is a summary and circle.
We'll dive a little deeper into it when we do
Exactly.
the training.
That'll be part of the 201 training.
Fair enough.
A lot more detail.
Because I think we want to talk about what interim action stands for.
And we will.
Thank you. All right.
This was just sort of a, as I say, a snapshot. And yeah, and as we move forward, that's part of the whole emphasis now, is to get more proactive, more positive, and to try to get things to you guys to help with the understanding. So, and at this time, I would like to take one quick moment to acknowledge someone. Paul, you're already standing up. So go ahead, step forward. Paul's been around here since 1982, working, and just want to acknowledge Paul, both when he was the back government employee and then when he went in as contract support. Paul is since 1982. 37 years he's been around here. But Paul is looking at retiring in February. So just wanted to acknowledge Paul. Give him a round of applause.
I didn't want Matt to do this, but he insisted, so that was so I went along with it. But I just wanted to. I didn't put in anything for a public comment or question, but I'd like to take this opportunity to speak for myself, not as an employee of the Air Force. I've got some questions to ask, and I live in this town too, and I've got a well that is impacted slightly with groundwater, PFAS and groundwater, and I had my well tested back in June of 2016, and I had 14 parts per trillion PFAS in my well. The MDHHS told me, don't drink your water. Okay? Well, last meeting we had, the township answered a question that was, when do you sample your water from the municipal water? And there was it was surprised that they hadn't sampled it for a couple of years for PFAS. So a member of the board, Mr. Cummings, stood up and said, we're going to sample that next week. And that was back in September. And here we are in November or December now. I haven't heard about any of those results from that municipal water sampling. So I'm curious what those results are. Because obviously the township is pushing municipal water to everybody. So I think everybody should know what the concentrations of the PFAS are in the water system. And as a matter of fact, there was a sample result that I've seen from 2016, happened to be the same day my well was sampled. It had 76 parts per trillion PFAS. I bet a lot of you people don't know that. But I'd like to know what the results are today for the municipal system.
Sure, I'll address that. First thing is that we're not pushing water on people. We are providing water to people because a lot of people want that water. Now, if you don't want it, you don't have to hook up. We're good with that. The next thing is they came out and tested the water last week. So
Good.
those results are not going to be out for another 4 to 6 weeks.
Oh, because I thought I heard Mr. Cummings say it was being done the next week.
No, it's the next month or two, is this fall, and it hadn't been 2 years, it was over 12 months. So if you want to round up a few months and make it 2 years, that's where you get your number from.
Okay. Have you shared those results with the community from the past? That's my last question.
Yes, they're publicly available.
Where?
Websites, the municipal system has mailed it out to all of its users back when it was tested before. Trying to think. Oh, the health department has it on their website also.
I've covered it at school board meetings.
Really? Okay.
But the last
I've never heard of
the
it.
last testing call was in 2016.
That's my understanding also.
Right. Then Hushra
76 parts per
confirmed that with me.
trillion. Got the results right here. So just, I don't know if everybody knew that. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Next question.
Next person that we have is, anything else on? Okay, next person is Mr. Dan O'Connor. Z? Or sign into the wrong one.
Yeah. I wasn't sure that I was going to speak tonight, but now that Paul talked about water, Arnie and I'm his alternate on the community RAB. My name's Dan O'Connor. I agree with a lot of what Arnie's doing, and some of the things that he's doing I don't agree with, and it's the same with a lot of the people in the room. But there's so many good things that they're doing. I just had to put my opinion out, and I've done it in written form. So I'll just go ahead and start. I say that since a few of the drinking water wells off base have been found to have PFAS contamination above EPA's health advisory of 70, it's my opinion that it's very impressive that Oscoda has received funding for running municipal water lines on both sides of Van Etten Lake.
Excellent work by the township personnel with assistance from the state legislators.
Thank you.
It's my opinion, this is only opinion, that the science behind the toxicological studies that provide us with minimum risk levels, reference doses, and maximum contaminant levels is failing to achieve realistic health advisories that anyone can utilize, including remediation program workers, doctors, private well drillers, municipality finished water providers, and so forth. The reason is simply that the gross inaccuracy of testing monkeys, rats, and mice with highly concentrated and specific poisons in a laboratory environment for a specific and short period of time until a specific abnormality or point of departure is observed is not well suited to the correlation to human ingestion of unspecified concentrations or quantities of multiple poisons. Uncertainty factors of 300 points are used to establish the correlations between rodents and humans in development of the ATSDR's MRLs. In the 2018 draft PFAS toxicology report. Then it is suggested that this gross conversion be multiplied by 0.2 because it is estimated that only 20% of our ingested PFAS comes from water that we drink, or its relative source contribution, and the other 80% comes from other sources like dust, diet, air, etc. This is not good science, and it's evident in how the first EPA Provisional Lifetime Health Advisory came out in 2009 with 200 parts per trillion for PFOS and 400 parts per trillion for PFOA. They had 30 points of uncertainty factors back then, and obviously the variation that they had in these PFOS and PFOA toxikinetics and toxidynamics of 81 times for PFOA and 13 times for PFOS was due to the use of monkeys for PFOS and mice for PFOA. And this just basically it has to do with the variations that they get. I can get into, the species and the types of mice and rats that they use, and there's all kinds of variables, and you have all kinds of choices for MRLs that people choose which ones they want to pick. Anyway, I'll skip a lot of this. I'm confused by the ATSDR's drinking water concentrations, which are published on their website just recently, November 8, 2018, which are back calculations from their new MRLs. To summarize, the data reads as follows. 130 parts per trillion total PFOA and PFOS for an adult weighing 80 kilograms and drinking 3.092 liters of water per day. Very precise numbers. 35 parts per trillion if you're a child weighing 7.8 kilograms, drinking 1.113 liters of water per day. These values I could live with, because I'm an adult weighing over 80 kilograms, and this was for an 80 kilogram adult. But I've calculated my family's hazard quotients, which anybody in this room can do if you'd like. And when I've done that, I found that my wife, she's going to either have to drink no more than 2.5 liters of water per day, or she needs to gain 40 pounds. Me, I'm fine because I'm over 80 kilograms, and so I can drink 3 liters a day, and I have no problems with my health hazard quotient. So. Anyway, I basically was saying that it's silly. The just like these uncertainty factors, and then a little thing I was thought of when I was growing up. I was told by a neighbor's father, who was a curiously wise man. He said to take the truth, cut it in half, and then only believe a quarter of that. And interestingly, that's what the ATSDR and EPA's health advisory numbers happen to be reduced by every few years. That's 1/8. That's take the truth, cut it in half, and believe a quarter of that. That's 1/8. Anyway, bottom line, I believe the RAB should focus on where the plumes are on the Air Force Base, which is what we're doing. and work with the Air Force on remediation of the highest concentration plumes. And I've seen the charts, and that's what we're doing. Then plan together for executing the cleanup of all the lower concentrations, and that's what I've heard. To continue to gather and review the GAC plant data to determine the efficiency of operation and work to provide new technology solutions for total base cleanup when the EPA's money comes pouring in after the new MCLs are released and we have strict regulatory guidance on cleanup. And I've seen some of those, discussions last night where Mr. Mars was talking about programs that they're looking at with contractors for the future, for cleaning up curtains and whatnot. It's good stuff, and I'm, looking forward to those things. So, thank you.
Next person, Irene Dunn.
No,
I wasn't the only
I
one.
need to make that one orange or something.
Color coded that one.
So I looked up I went to the Tawas City. It provides water to Oscoda, Osable. It's the hsrua.org. And on their drinking water report, the data is old. It's 15 and 16, but there's 13 samples, so it's not like just one sample. And the levels are very low. The PFOS and PFOA added is only 4 and 8. So it's 7 times lower than the LHA. And the other PFAS is also very low, 6 and 19 parts per trillion. So you're only looking at total PFAS of, doing the math in my head, around 25 to 30 max, 20 something, which is pretty good numbers. That's pretty good numbers. It's still there. It's detections. I mean, we've had other parts of the country, I'm not going to say where the wells are better than the public water. So we actually switched some people and had to switch them back because they were like, wait a minute, now my water has more PFAS in it than my well had. So you have to be careful about this stuff, and so it's a good idea that Paul suggested that we check those current numbers because those numbers are from 15 and 16. So anyway.
If I could, I just wanted to point out that I have the data here which added up the numbers of the total PFAS. And that's how I came up with this number. Now, whether this data or not is the same as what you're looking at. That's where I came up with that.
Greg Cole again. I was asked by the NOW group to investigate the municipal water a little bit, so I did, and I found out that Ursula, which is our intake, our water treatment, has finally opened up to the idea of the PFAS contamination. In the past, it was pretty tight. They weren't going to entertain many thoughts about it. But they meet the first Tuesday of every month, and the meetings are open to the public. Our new Superintendent Dave Schaefer has been attending these meetings, and so has Aaron, our supervisor. And so I learned a little bit there. Then I moved on and I started doing some investigation and was wondering why we haven't had our water tested since 2016. That's why the NOW group wanted me to look into it. And I found out that, to give you an example, they're testing city water all over the state. Mike told me that, Mike Jury. Okay, let's say there's something that happens in Parchment, this is what happened. Now all of a sudden, all our resources has to go over there, and that includes testing of the water treatment plants. So it gets delayed, and that's why, in my opinion, I don't even think you'll see the results of the water testing that was just done. It'll be longer than 6 weeks, because the lady I talked to and I can't remember her name, but I have it in my notes. If they have to get up and go to the other side of the state for an emergency, that's what they have to do. So what it comes down to is we lack the resources. We don't have the labs that we need to keep up. Well, we need more labs than just that to get the kind of speed and the kind of results that people are looking for. Realize, you need to take an account and realize that these things are not going to happen fast. We're adding more sites, every month throughout our state, it seems like, and throughout the country. So I just wanted to shed some light on.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and, you'll have one more comment?
One more comment, and then any other comments, go ahead and put them in writing and submit them. And that's part of the process as we move forward, meeting an hour earlier, that 4:30 to 5:30, that way we can go through a lot of these, especially submit them in writing. You have a lot of great questions. And then that way we can start working on those, sort of go through them with the individuals that submit them. So a lot of times it's better if somebody puts it in writing, the question. And also one last foot stomp on the training, which we will let you guys know. And we need to find a location to have it here. And also, you had a comment, Arnie?
Oh, it's going to be a physical training versus a webinar?
It'll be physical.
Okay.
Yep.
Including the alternates?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, full wrap. Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, it needs to be a face-to-face training, just like our meetings with the regulators work best when it's face-to-face. So.
And the other thing is on people who want to join, you have people that you know, and we need to be diverse and maybe even a wider area because of the Great Lake and that effect. And plus, Bob's been going up Cedar Lake and all that is a concept that we may want to look at. But the new RAB members and who wants, so no, there's a cap at 9 voting, so 18 total, so primary and alternate. Right, and we've already got 3 vacancies, plus there could be some movement anyways.
Exactly.
However, it's the advertising that we have to do in the paper and so forth to advertise so that the area that is chosen, okay, under the RAB handbook and everything, is put out there so that we get, and you guys talk to your neighbors. You get someone that's interested, has some experience and some value, there's lots of people out there, then please get them to, and it could be put up on the website, your website also, what the process is and the application. And we can get it out by Facebook too.
Because there was one gentleman that submitted last year, but he mailed it versus emailing it and it got lost. And that was.
The flyer is currently online, but we're gonna update it just
Yeah.
email.
Okay.
We'll make that available as we go. This is a one shot because we're moving forward and
Get it out there so people could always come to the training and turn in their application in person, which is always good. I'd rather see somebody look at them in the eye.
seemed like we had one more, you said.
One more. For this.
Last comments or?
Yeah, it was in regards to one of the photos of the surface water testing from what Bob was talking about coming out of Clark's Marsh, and the numbers that were coming out of Clark's Marsh. I know a number of people have been trying to identify something to remediate inside of Clark's Marsh, or try to figure out inside the circular process, or to identify Clark's Marsh as the 18th site of contamination, and that. So my question is that with Peace opening up environmental risk assessments and the allowability of an environmental risk assessment outside of ESI, because of the numbers that we're talking about of the contamination of PFAS coming out of Clark's Marsh, does that constitute an assessment, an environmental assessment of how we can start assessing the contamination that's flowing from FTO2 down through the marsh, because that's what's occurring, correct? That's why the contamination is flowing into Clark's Marsh, is the incomplete curtain, or the curtain is short. So if we have an assessment of how we can stop that contamination flowing into the marsh, then we may be able to affect the hotspot numbers that we're seeing inside of Clark's Marsh, coming down, draining into the river, dissipating into the river. But it opens up, for me, in my opinion, an environmental assessment that we're able to now conduct in that area, so that we can start addressing Clark's Marsh inside of the circle process.
And that's why at the beginning when I talked about this and the full list, those added ones for projects or studies and action, identifying Clark's Marsh as an old legacy sink of PFAS, and that's continuing to emit into the river. So that's a site. That's not an environmental risk assessment. That is a sight line, just like contamination on the base. It's got its own plume. So that's number one that gets added. But then
we identify
yes,
that inside of
the site inspection, yes, it can be. It's just priority. But that has to be added so that they can address and tell us when and where.
Good question, Jeff, and that's one of the things that, yes, we will put together a good response to you, and it will be addressed at the very next RAB meeting at that 4:30 time frame.
Yeah,
because we need to talk about that and sort of explain it in more detail to you more than the time.
No, I got it. I mean, it's last minute.
But it is
was-
good.
I mean,
Yes, sir.
But because the numbers that we're seeing here are thousands, you know, we're at 2,600, 1,800. It's way, way high. 7,000. Those are immediate numbers that we need to address about this particular watershed immediately. Maybe it's something we can affect now with some action, we have to talk about the actions that we need to take to eliminate.
And that's
this
part
flow.
of what we're looking at is, do we have a good adequate capture across, you know, the capture zone there at FTO2? Do we need
know
to?
that answer already, don't we?
We need to look at that. We need to see also, do we do a pilot study possibly of doing a horizontal well across the contaminated part of the aquifer there versus more extraction?
In the marsh.
Yeah, no, right
curb,
above
curb.
by
Right.
the FTO2 area.
Right,
So you had that off, because if you look at the reductions that we're seeing since FTO2 went in, there's been a 90% reduction. So it is
In the
working. We
curtain-
just to
in the
make
curtain
sure.
area that it's covering.
Yes.
So if we were able to extend that curtain, however many feet, whatever.
And
the
that's what
study
we have our
says,
contractor working on right now.
Right, so that we may be able to affect these numbers, so that maybe in the spring, we're not seeing 7,000, 2,800.
And that's the reason we need to talk about it at the next RAB
that's an
open
action
house at
item.
4:30.
So I request that as an action item on the next agenda.
Yes, and we'll get into a lot more detail, the FTO2 question.
Fair enough.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Any more comments from the co-chairs?
No. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Yes. Congratulations, Arnie.
Well, Jeff, I think that you're right, because I think that we need to clarify the formality of that.
Well, we voted
No.
Arnie in.
Oh, that.
We voted Arnie in.
It was
If
unanimous.
For re-election, then I think the RAB needs to vote
Okay.
As an official
Yeah, I do too.
action.
I'm really kind of confused because it seemed as though it couldn't possibly have been a decision on your part. You must not have been following the process, because I don't believe that that's the way it was defined in the agreement that we.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
The
nominate-
community primary members are the voting members.
Correct.
Okay, and we now have 9 with the alternates put in. So,
So,
What are you asking for?
a show of hands or a written, what do you want to do?
Okay, so we want to have
can we,
Let's do
I
it
think a show of
written.
hands.
let's do a show of hands.
I think a show of hands. That's my opinion. I think it needs to be an open vote as opposed to the last vote that we had.
well, somebody ought to nominate him.
He already did.
I'll nominate Arnie.
All in
Okay.
favor of Arnie for the RAB co-chair, community co-chair position, please?
No, you're not.
Yes,
Yeah.
Irene, you are to vote.
You're a special alternate, you can vote.
Thank you.
And again, no process here that I'm not trying to bypass anything. I just thought,
We didn't have a
since there were no
process.
other nominations, I thought that was the way forward. No disrespect. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
RAB is now adjourned.
Hey, Arnie, get to work harder.
I know.
This Wurtsmith Restoration Advisory Board meeting is made possible through funding by the Township of Oscoda, the Air Force Civil Engineering Center, and the Au Sable River chapter of the Michigan Steelhead and Salmon Fishermen's Association.